Okay, welcome everybody to another Art of Composing Composer Symposium. I'm John Branningham. It's been a few weeks since I've been doing this. I've been on a little vacation, and I also have some exciting news for me as a composer. But I'll wait a minute for other people to start showing up. I see Charles and Clinged Eggs. Hello, welcome. So yeah, it's been a while since I've done a symposium, but I've basically been out of the loop for the last couple of weeks. We took a little trip to Spain. We're not really little, actually quite a big trip to Spain. It was about 2 weeks long, and we traveled all over northern Spain. So it was a lot of fun. We did that with 3 children though, so it was also a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it, and just had a total blast. And for the last few weeks after getting back, I'm really excited to announce this, and hello to everybody else showing up, Cherry and Oliver, that I am now scoring a new soap opera. So that's very, very fun and exciting. It's going to be called, or it is called Hilton Head Island, and it hasn't come out yet. It's going to be on the PureFlix platform. So it'll be released kind of Netflix style. And yeah, we're just working through. I've scored the first 2 episodes so far, and I'm just working my way through it. It's a lot of fun, a lot of music to write though. I'm doing probably about 10 to 12 minutes of music per episode, and so I'm having to do about 10 to 12 minutes per week or so. And I'm trying to push myself. I know with something like this, it's easy to fall into what's, I guess, considered kind of default music. And I want to try to avoid any default music traps and really try to stretch myself as a composer. I look at it as an opportunity. I mean, part of it is that I'm going to have strict deadlines that I have to meet, and sometimes I have to do a lot of music quickly. But the other side of it is that I've got deadlines, and that'll force me to really write a lot more music. And one thing I've learned is the more you write, the better you get. So I really want to push myself, and I already feel like I've been pushing myself with, trying to create some interesting pieces for it. So yeah, very exciting for me. It means that probably I won't be able to create as much for Art of Composing as I had planned for this year, but I still am, obviously doing symposiums, and I'm going to be getting back into the fold for doing articles and still creating courses. So that's still coming along, but it also means that my whole life is basically revolving around just getting this music out every week. So other than that, welcome to everybody. Welcome Gustav and Matt in the chat. And go ahead and post some questions really about anything that you've got, anything that's been on your mind or what you've been working on as a composer, or in the Academy if you're an Academy member. So while I was in Spain, while we're waiting on questions here, I looked a little bit into Basque music, which is my heritage is Basque, so that's northern Spain, and some of the kind of interesting things that you can find out about the music. I mean, obviously, the history of the Basque people goes back like thousands of years, just about. So their music is pretty old, and their traditional music focuses on this instrument called the chistu, which is like a one-handed flute kind of thing, almost like a recorder. And I did buy one. I don't think I've got it in this room right now. I've just tried to always, learn a little bit, and I had a blast. We went to San Sebastian, which is kind of like a really cool port city, and one of the local, I don't know what you call it, it's like almost like a marching band kind of thing, but they came out and did a little concert, and I just had a blast just trying to soak it all in and doing everything. So I see Clinged Eggs is asking for me to look over a short piece. Yeah, go ahead if you want to. While we're live here, send in a piece. You can just send it to my email, john.brantingham@artofcomposing.com. I'll post that here. Let me move on to Charles' question here. He said, I had someone say that instead of the root and the fifth, we should be using root and sixth. Is this a trend in modern music, or is it just preference? Well, the root and the fifth are... let's back up here, because they really have 2 different sounds and you should be using both the root and fifth and root and the sixth. So often, we'll say that the root and fifth on their own are kind of sparse or open sounding, and it's that you can't tell the tonality from them, right? So this is just root and fifths, and it could be major, it could be minor, but by leaving out the third, you keep things ambiguous. So if you want to make it sound ambiguous, where am I going to go with this? I could go sweet, or I could go dark. Right? Now, when he says you should be using the root and sixth, if you're using the same, if you're starting from the original root, then it's a totally different chord. That could be an A minor chord, right, in first inversion. It could be an F chord in second inversion. Or what he may be talking about is you're putting it in first inversion, right? Same chord. I think what we really need to get around is this idea that we have to be using one specific thing or this specific thing or another. Everything can sound good at the right moment, and everything can sound bad at the wrong moment. So if you're going along, right, that's a sixth right there. That sounds really great there. And right, that was keeping the root in the bass. Sounds just as good. You should be using both of those. And I think it's a little bit ambiguous. Now, to say if it's a trend in modern music or not, I think trends are hard to nail down right now just because there's so many people creating so many different styles of music in so many directions. To say something's a trend, you may have a trend in film scoring because it's kind of a niche thing. There's usually a small group of people that control most of the money when it comes to movies, and if one thing makes a lot of money, other people will probably jump on and say, oh, that's what we need to do. That's a trend, right? But to say in general modern music is something a trend versus something not, that's really hard to nail down. So Charles, hopefully that points you in the right direction. I would say that probably if you're really thinking about intervals and how they work together as a sound and separating that a little bit from functional harmony, then maybe you want to dive a little bit into modal counterpoint. And the book that I would recommend is by Peter Schubert. It's called Modal Counterpoint Renaissance Style. And I'll see if I can get a link in the description here. So it'll show up, I think, after it. But if you just Google it, Modal Counterpoint Renaissance Style, it's one of the best books I've seen on learning counterpoint. It's he just breaks things down so clearly, and he has you. What I really like about the book is that he really shows you how most counterpoint is just a series of one note moving to another note, and you just tie those together. But if you get good at doing every possibility from this note to the next note, right? So let's say you've got C and D, right, as your canus firmus, and you need to work through, you need to know what are the possibilities above and below it, Let's see, you could go, or whatever they are. There's lots and lots of possibilities. Then, and it's been a long time since I've worked on my Renaissance counterpoint. This was a couple of years ago now that I was really studying it. But you can really start to see all the possibilities in a line because your brain can quickly say, oh, I can go this way, that way, that way, this way, this way. And you can start to write really good lines based in counterpoint. So that would be a book I would recommend looking at. Let me look at some other questions here. So let's see. This is Contra Coates Stella. When I write, I always have ideas, but I cannot seem to develop the ideas or melodies into something bigger than maybe a 30-second piece. Any advice for developing your music? Yeah, I've got a lot of ideas about developing. Well, really, for me, what it comes down to is it's easy to feel like you've played out an idea relatively quickly when you're just going bar by bar by bar by bar and trying to write from beginning to the end of your piece. Now, sometimes you're on a roll and that's called for. That's the right thing to do. But if you're feeling stagnant, my recommendation is that's a great time to lean on traditional forms. Now, obviously, you've probably heard me talk about Sonata Form, and I've got lots of reasons why I like Sonata Form as a vehicle for your music. It's a great way to practice. You have a lot of examples to pull from, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Sonata Form. Really, the best way to learn a form is to find a piece that you like and to start to break it down. And it doesn't have to be super in-depth, detailed analysis with the right label here and the right label there. Just start general. So look at it and say, okay, I really like this piece by Beethoven, and I want to write something kind of similar, maybe similar feel just formally. I'm going to look at the big sections and say, this feels like it's one theme. This section feels kind of like a second theme maybe, or transition. And I would start by trying to compose just a theme, right? And then just another theme. And they don't have to be big. They don't have to be 30, 40 measure themes or anything like that. Just do something 8 measures and 8 measures. And what that gives you is it gives you the raw compositional material, right? So you may write a theme like... right? Something like that. I don't know. And that's your A theme, right? That's your exposition, whatever you want to call it. But now you know that you've got to get somewhere with that, right? And to say that you're going to just start developing that, right? You feel like you get to a point you're like, just kind of repeating myself and doing the same thing over and over again. And at this point, I find it's good to have some more raw compositional material. So that's when I'll come up with something, different, and it's good to put it in a different key. Now, kind of traditionally, that could be going to the dominant, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can really be whatever you want. So we could say, let's go to E major, right? Right, so know that there's more compositional material to work with, and you'll have to bear with me. I'm just kind of improvising this stuff right now. So the themes themselves may not be the greatest. However, that gives me somewhere to go. Now I've got to figure out, well, how do I get from C major to E major in a logical way, right? Maybe I could go from here to a 3 chord, right, which is E minor, and then figure out how to... something like that, and now I've got a way to get there harmonically, and now I've got whatever I did originally. Whatever I played before, right? I've got now something to grab onto. It's like climbing up a tree. If you go up a tree and it's just a trunk, you're going to have a lot of trouble. But if you've got these other branches to grab onto while you're going, things start to make sense. And it's the same compositionally. It's like your brain starts to connect. Oh, I think I can actually see some connections musically between this and that I could use in my transition. I can do, there's a million ways you can go about it. But for me, nothing beats having some more raw compositional material. Now, generating that material could be improvisation like this. Whatever I was doing here, you could try something related. That's kind of related to the first idea I had, but I put it in a minor key. That's the relative minor, A minor, right? Or you do the parallel minor, or however you want to do it. There's a lot of different ways to cut it, and I would recommend just starting with that. write out a couple different ideas that you have and figure out ways to connect them. And you'll find that developing becomes a different process at that point. Developing is about connecting ideas, finding ways to combine those ideas, finding ways to chop them up. I mean, in my Sonata Form course, we talk about a lot of these techniques, which are called loosening techniques. And the idea with loosening techniques is that you're effectively, in your mind, you're starting with a tight-knit theme, right? You're starting with something that's 8 measures that usually matches something like a sentence or a period or some kind of hybrid theme. And then you're finding ways to stretch it out. You may add extensions to it. So you take little formal chunks and add them on the end. You may expand within an idea. So you've got a single measure that you could stretch it out internally, right? Making the idea, right? Kind of making the idea feel a little bit longer. You've got asymmetry where you could have maybe 2 measures and 3 measures, or, you've got interpolation where you're adding things that seem like they're unrelated in the middle, like little formal chunks that seem like they're unrelated. Whatever, So hopefully that points you in the right direction development-wise. I would say one of the best things you can do, pick a piece that you like, start to analyze it formally, see how the composer goes from this section to that section, where does it go harmonically, what kind of melodies are used at what point, what kind of accompaniments, if it's orchestra, how do they match orchestration with the musical ideas. So okay, let me move on and say some hellos. Hello, Robert. And I saw Kikistani there. Stanley, hello. I think you've got a question here, so let's jump to that. What are some ways to get recognition for compositions, especially if you're coming to it as an older person? Well, I'm not going to say that I'm the end-all be-all for being noticed as a composer. I think it's good to start small, right? To start with an area that you maybe can actually have a little bit of influence on. So wherever you are as a composer, start there. Start in your city, or it depends on where you're at. I mean, if you're in LA, start in your street, your neighborhood. If you're in a smaller city, start in your city and find out who are the movers and shakers, in the musical community, because more often than not, locally or even kind of the next town over probably has a little concert hall, an orchestra. I know with Thousand Oaks here, we've got a really decent concert hall, and we have orchestras that come and go here. And my focus as a composer hasn't really been a concert composer. Obviously I write occasionally concert works, and I write stuff for myself and at home. My focus has been film scoring, and one of the ways I've really attempted to be noticed is just by going out and making connections with the right people. Shake hands and go to events, go to the places where their composers and the people who support composers are going. And I would say get creative, really try to get outside the box, because it's going to be, if you put your mind to it, you're probably going to figure out some way that other people aren't really thinking of as an avenue to get your music noticed. Everybody puts their stuff on SoundCloud. Everybody puts their stuff on Facebook. Everybody joins all the Facebook composer groups and say, hey, listen to my epic track. And that gets you nowhere. It really gets you nowhere, because the one thing I have learned is that people want to work with people that they like. And if you go out and you meet people and you show that you're not a jerk and that you can actually write some decent music, people will want to work with you. It may be that you go out and you find players, people who want to play your music, and not so much people who want to listen to it. If you get the players on your side, they'll spread your music around in ways that you probably can't even think of right now. Obviously there's opportunities to try to license your music for film and TV if you feel like the production value is high enough. But that's a tough game, and once again, it's about meeting the right people. So I would say, yeah, posting it on SoundCloud or Facebook is probably the least effective way to do things. Look for an audience first and maybe compose to them. I know that goes against this kind of romantic ideal that we have as artists, that I'm going to compose what's inside of me only, and it'll be an expression of who I am, and everybody else can, be damned. But we're not all Beethoven, and even Beethoven wrote for money, So I think there's something to be said for finding an audience first and composing for that audience. If you are wanting to write only for string quartet and that's all you want to do, well, find out where the string quartets are performing and what kind of music they're performing. Write stuff that'll be good for weddings. Write stuff that'll be good for parties, waltzes. I don't know, whatever. Find the string quartets and ask them, what kind of literature are you looking for? So yeah, those are just some of the ideas I've got. But I think it really comes down to just sitting down and thinking about what are some weird, cool ways that I feel like I can get my music out there. And you'll probably be surprised what you come up with. Grab a beer, grab some buddies, and just brainstorm. Let's see. Gustav is asking what format for sending music, and yes, XML is the best because it's cross-platform, and if you compose in Sibelius and you're a newer version, or if you're in MuseScore or Finale, I should be able to open it up. So let me go ahead and jump in and see if, okay, I have let's see, I've got an email here. This is from Ryan. It's called Morning Variations. So let's go ahead and try to throw this into Sibelius. And give me a second while I open it up. Okay. Now there's always a slight risk that this won't play back the way that you originally imagined it, and that's just the nature of the beast with trying to kind of impromptu do this. So let me get this looking a little bit better. And okay, so yes, let's go ahead and listen. Let me make sure this is in. I'll put this in Note Performer. Well, it's got a lot of piano, so let's listen in Sibelius sounds. Unfortunately, hold on, let me figure this out. That sound is not right on the drum set. I don't know how critical the drums are for this, but I think I'm gonna just take them out because they're not working. So this is the dangers once again. Here, let me just mute it. Okay, let's try one more time. Okay, I'm going to skip the repeat here so we can keep going. Oh, looks like just a little outro. Okay, well, it seems like you did a fine job, and I'm curious. I know there's a little bit of a delay, but if you could respond, it's kind of an interesting group that you're writing for here. If that's like a weird Sibelius mistake, the harpsichord and piano, or if that's actually what you were planning, and kind of what's the story behind the group. But otherwise, I think you did a really good job. Uh, I mean, I don't have a lot of critique other than I would kind of have to know what your goal is, what you're planning. But overall, I feel like it really works as a form. It feels logical. It's always a balance, I think, between um, it's a balance between familiarity and kind of surprises. And I think, you leaned more towards familiar kind of sound. It feels very much like song form a little bit. Um, and you've got this nice kind of chromatic descending, section here that I think is really nice. Um, so yeah, I don't know if there's any specific feedback you're looking for. Um, Nothing stood out in my mind that needed a lot of work. I don't know. Once again, if these are these the way you've notated this here, if you're really particular about that, they take a second there to stop. But it's a little bit messy for me. I would probably just change these to half notes and just clean that up and put like a little. You got the breath mark over here, but you probably just put those over there as well. Yeah, those kind of things. And same with the notation here. It's probably just the fact that it was XML. These would be, second voice there to separate those out. But let's see. The story behind the grouping is just I love the sound of woodwinds and harpsichord and the piano. Add more mellow basses to the piece that reminds me of water. Well, that's interesting. And yeah, I think that's totally valid. I think there's choosing small ensembles that are unique and interesting, that can take you a ways. And actually, getting back to Stanley's question, ways to get your music noticed. Find some unique ensembles. Look for groups that have something different about them. It could be it's like, oh wow, there's this group with piano, harpsichord, and four woodwinds, and that gives you really something to grab at. Those kind of restrictions, I find, lead to a lot of really interesting creative choices. When you have only got four woodwinds, you can't get a massive sound out of that. So you got to get clever with what you do, and especially with something like a harpsichord, you kind of have to be delicate a lot. I think maybe there's a little bit of room for a little more variation in the keyboards. It's easy to, especially in notation software, to just treat them as a texture. Right? You've got the piano. Where is it? Right now, as a pianist, totally easy. Going to be fine. The piece is short enough; they're probably not going to get too bored. But what stops you from doing? Right? Adding just a little bit more shape to the line. You can control where things are going. You can control, a little bit more of the dynamic push, right? Like right here would be a perfect, let's see, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do renotate. So you could do something like that right there. And that will add quite a bit of shape to it. So, that's the kind of things that I look for usually on a second pass through. So I've kind of laid out this process that I have of composing, and part of it is coming back and recomposing things, right? Almost like placeholders. And I would say at this point in your composition, development-wise, not so much development of the ideas, kind of laterally, but just I guess, improving on the ideas that you have, is going back and rethinking, is this the best way that I can do this, right? To repeat this same texture for however many bars you repeat it for, is there a better way to do that? Is there a more interesting way to do that? Can I share that texture among all the instruments at some point to give it kind of a little more integrated feel? I mean, if you look at up top, you've got a lot of sustained notes for all of the woodwinds, and it could be a way for you to try to send it around, right? If you've got everybody sustaining, then maybe it'd be good to have the piano stop for a second and have the flute go whatever it is, however you want to do it. That's kind of the fun part. This is the part that I really like. Once you get to the end of your piece, that's when you start to get the really good ideas. That's what I found, is that it's part of it is just struggling through that process of getting from the beginning to a point where you've got pretty much all of the raw material that you need in your composition, and you've pieced them together, and now you start to find like, oh wow, this spot over here it's perfect to bring in my original theme, so that I can tie it in, and it's going to be a counter melody here, and nobody will see it coming, and or maybe here I share this texture around, whatever. So, but thanks for sending that in. I think it's a good piece, good work in progress, and let's jump up here. See if there's any other questions. Let's see. This is Matt wondering if you could do a simple idea, film score oriented, and work on developing it, how you can develop it without making it something completely different. I'm trying to get better at it, but find it very hard. Okay, so I think you're asking me to write like a score, a little bit of a score idea. I don't have my DAW all open right now. But maybe we can jump into that in a minute. Let's see. I'm going to try to look at some other stuff here. I think somebody sent me... Oh, and Sibelius quit. Okay. Gotta love Sibelius. Quitting on me. Let me get Sibelius started up again, and we'll look at Nabil's piece here. And then we also have Gustav's piece. So, and I'm just hitting them in order. Let's see. And thank you everybody for welcoming me back. It's been a couple of weeks off, so okay. And almost there. Pull this in. And let me go ahead and open it up. Okay, here we go. So this is called Sonatina Number 1 in C major. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there because I've got some ideas for you that I think will probably be helpful. So one thing that I think would probably do you well is to really think about harmonically the direction you're going, because harmony is really absolutely critical to the form, and just stepping away from having to comply with what a sentence is, or a period, or sonata form, or anything like that, and just saying, I'm going to try to figure out how to make things feel like they're going in a specific direction. They're going forward. They're moving forward harmonically. What that can really do for you, though, is it gives you something to grab onto melodically, and it will really, I think, inform the pacing of your piece. So if we jump back here just to point out something that felt a little bit too big of a weight here, is this rest that you've got. These kind of things, I feel like this kind of stuff happens when you're composing by the seat of your pants, right? When you're not necessarily leaning on what you know as a composer. And in the early stages of learning to compose, I fully understand, because I did this too when I was learning, kind of going with the flow, going with what you're doing improvising-wise. But I think there's a lot more power in holding back and saying, I'm going to stick to what I know is going to work, and I'm going to try to master that. And then within that context, I'm going to then try to improvise a little bit. I'm going to try to expand a little bit. And if you look at, say, the really early compositions of Mozart, right? Symphony number 1, and like the first little piano pieces that he wrote, they're very, very simple. They're, a lot of this, like, sorry, hit the wrong key there. But they're very, very like 1, 5, 1, 2, 6, 5, 1 kind of stuff, right? Right, that kind of stuff. And I think Mozart's father, Leopold Mozart, who was, widely considered one of the greatest music teachers in Europe at the time, knew what he was doing when he's teaching somebody composition, obviously, because his son was Mozart, turned out to be one of the greatest composers of all time. But he didn't let him just go out and just write whatever. I mean, you don't see these pieces of, Mozart where he's... where it kind of feels like this, like it doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't know where it's starting from and where it's supposed to be ending up. And if you can sit back and say, no, I know what's going to work harmonically, in that I have to have, what I like to call a complete harmonic rotation. So if you've ever seen my harmony chart, in fact, let me see if I can pull that up for a second, because I think it would be useful talking about this stuff. Give me a second. I probably should just have this ready to go, but it's like deep in my images here somewhere. Okay, here we go. So let me show you this. So I'm gonna change this to the... Sorry, I'm trying to find the chart that I opened up. Okay, so here's the chart. Let me get it kind of centered on the screen. And so if you look at this chart, right, it's got 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 1, right? It's got kind of the core diatonic chords that you can use. And what it shows you is you can move from left to right and then back on the arrows. So I can go 1, 6, 4, 2, 7, 5, 1. And I can skip from left to right anything. So I can go from 1 to 4 to 5 and back to 1, right? I can also go from 5 to 6, right? Or 5 to 4, 6, which are both considered deceptive cadences, right? And at a basic level, that's kind of the boiling down diatonic harmony. You boil it down to that kind of stuff. Now, there's obviously lots of ways you can make it more interesting, and we're not concerned with that right now. What we're concerned with is saying, okay, I'm going to take 4 measures, and I'm going to go from 1, and I'm going to make my way back to 1 going on the chart, right? So here I am on 1, and then maybe 6, maybe 2, and then 5, and then now 1 again, maybe 4, maybe 7, 5/7, right? So now I've written 2 4-bar harmonic phrases that I know harmonically are taking me from the beginning, taking me to the middle, and to the end. Like they feel like there's a really strong direction. And these charts, by the way, are on my diatonic harmony articles. So you don't have to be a member to get these charts or anything. You can just find them there. I have posts on here. I'm working on a kind of more in-depth chart. But going to Spain and then getting this soap opera has kind of gotten in the way of fully putting that out. However, this stuff's on there, and I explain how to use it on the article as well. So yeah, I would say start with something like this, and then once you have that, go back and look at your melody and how you've written it, right? And see how you can make that fit. So if we were to take this, let me jump back to your piece here, and say, okay, I'm gonna just. Here's 1, right? You've got a 4 chord. And then I'm going to try to, I'm going to do a 2 chord here. Right? So there's a 5/7 chord. And that's 4 measures, right? We, as humans, we like even measured things, 2 measures, 4 measures, 8 measures, 16 measures. It usually divides up nice and evenly. I'm not worried about asymmetry. I'm not worried about extension, expansion, these other loosening techniques I talked about at the beginning. But now I'm going to see how can I make sure that this is going to work, right? So far, right? This is the only non-chord tone. We'll just leave that in for a minute, right? This is going to work. This marginal because you're hitting a strong beat with an E there, but we'll just see how this is going to sound. Here we should probably change this as the first beat on a new chord. We'll change that to an A so that it works. Right? It may be pushing it here. That probably is going to sound better. This is going to sound really good because this is the sound of the 13 chord. Right? And over here, if we change this now, and in fact, we can probably just get rid of this measure here, right? And this is what I would do. I would take this, and I'm going to cut that out right there. And I'm going to change that, and I'm going to go boom, like that. So now we've, I'm going to put this over here. And get rid of this bar. This is some of my Sibelius magic. Now, I'm not going to change the rest of the piece here because I want you to go through that process of thinking about how am I going to do this, right? And there's a minor chart on the thing as well. But if we listen to this, it's probably, to your ears, I basically kept the same melody, kept the same style of accompaniment, changed chords a little bit. It's probably going to feel a lot better. Right, so now we've got other problems that we got to work through later on, but if you step back and say, okay, I'm gonna use this as not so much as this is a finished piece that I've made, but this is a sketch that I've started, right? I've sketched out some ideas, and now I can take some of these ideas. Obviously, we probably do want to come back, right, and change some of these. Something like that, maybe. Right, and over here, I would say this didn't really work for me. So I'll just change it to a C right there. That's going to work. This didn't really... Let's see. I mean, take your pick. We can repeat a note. So, overall, I would say that that you have just some sketched out ideas that really do need quite a bit of work here, but it's definitely not the end of anything, right? You've already got a lot of direction of where you want to go. Now, you've called it sonatina, number 1 in C major, which means that you really should be sticking to proper sonata form, right? And once again, this is a really easy one for you to look up a model. Look up a model that you like. I don't know if you're going off of. I mean, Beethoven is the WOO numbering, right? Or was that Haydn? I can't remember. Is that Beethoven? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Werke ohne I can't speak German. Works without opus number. Okay, no, maybe there's other composers, but I've seen that with Beethoven in particular. So, you've got a direction. I would say look at Scarlatti's stuff, look at Haydn's stuff, because you're going to be able to pull out, this is how they wrote their main melody, right? This is how they wrote their secondary theme or their transition or whatever. So that's what I would do. I would start looking at that and try to match what they're doing in spirit. Not necessarily every chord, although there is a lot of benefit, and I would say you'd have huge benefit in stepping back from this piece, taking a piece by Beethoven or taking by Haydn or Scarlatti or whoever you want to take, and going measure by measure, figuring out what the chord is, and it doesn't have to be rocket science. You add up the notes. It's like, you've got an E up here and a C in the bass, and then it's going like this. That's a C chord, right? Or A flat, E flat, and C flat, right? That's an A flat minor, right? You just go through, you figure out what the chords are, and you look at what the melody's doing. You look for places where it feels like it's resting. You look for places where it feels like it's really active, changes in dynamics, just big changes in general. And you'll start to see the form. You'll start to hear and feel the form, and copy it, right? Not just copy out by hand, which is something I recommend doing, like actually legitimately copying out pieces by hand, but model it, steal from it, steal its ideas. So no one's going to come and slap you on the hand if you're a beginning composer and you're learning from Beethoven or Mozart or Haydn or Hans Zimmer or John Williams or, Eric Whitacre or whoever you want to learn from. It doesn't even matter. If you like their music, you need to basically steal from it. I know that sounds bad to a lot of people. I'm not saying steal from it and then go sell it, take a cue from John Williams and say that you wrote it. I'm saying steal the ideas, integrate them, assimilate them, make them your own, figure out how you can change them. And that's how music changes. That's how music propagates, and that's how we develop new music. So, okay. Well, thanks for sending that. Let's see. We've got other questions here. Let's see. Let's see. Faith is asking, please, can you recommend composing software, keyboard with fingered chords? Okay, so, composing software. Obviously there's a lot of choices out there. My favorite is actually composing hardware, and it is let's see here. Let me get this screen up. Let's see if you can see. It's called staff paper and a pencil and a piano. So that's how I like to get away from the computer, first and foremost, and really work on my ears, my musical thinking, kind of, hearing something in my mind, being able to transcribe that on paper. It's called audiation, being able to understand the music in your head. Now, that being said, my choice for notation software right now is still Sibelius. I still think it's the strongest out there. I know Dorico is coming up fast as a contender, and probably the next couple rounds of updates will really bring it into its own. Personally, I think it's not quite there yet, feature-wise. And I still use Sibelius for all my score preparation and heavy duty, working out orchestration stuff. My choice of DAW, so my digital audio workstation, is Digital Performer, and it's really geared very much towards film composers. I know it's also really popular with running big live shows and things like that. But some of the features that they have for film composers, like the tempo finding features, which I just haven't seen in other DAWs, are really, really good. I mean, you set up your cue, you put in your markers, and you say, I want to find a tempo that hits all these markers between 110 and 117 beats per minute. It'll tell you exactly what tempo is the best fit. And that's huge for a film composer. I mean, finding that right tempo is probably the most critical thing next to like figuring out where the music starts and stops. And then, there's obviously you've got Cubase, you've got Pro Tools, you've got Logic, you've got GarageBand, you've got Reaper, you've got Studio One. I mean, these are all really good things. GarageBand is kind of the free one. It's not, I think it's probably missing a whole lot of features that Logic has. I don't use either one personally. But one of my best friends is a Logic composer, and it works perfectly for him. He's, earning a living as a composer. So the fact of the matter is, whatever seems to fit you right. Like you probably hear this a lot, but I mean, I would honestly just go with your gut feeling. Like if you're looking at software and you really like the way Logic looks, right? Or you really like the way Cubase looks, and you've got some people that you like and they say, I love Cubase, right? If you're a huge Hans Zimmer fan, they all use Cubase over at Remote Control for the most part. A lot of other composers that I know that I look up to, they're Digital Performer users. And when I was searching it out, I just happened to be like, oh, I kind of like their stuff. I'm going to use Digital Performer. And they're all good. All these DAWs are all really strong, powerful tools for composing. Now, there's a lot of other things out there that you can try out if you want. I know there's some stuff coming out that's going to have AI behind it and some machine learning and stuff. I don't know a whole lot about those pieces of software. I think the critical thing is, if you're in the process of searching for something, is to just look at what are the features, what do you think you're going to be using it for, and how do you like to work. One of the things that I look at my DAW, now it depends on the style of composing I'm doing, right? If I've got to pump out like these last couple of weeks where I've got to pump out, say, 10, 12, 15 minutes of music in a week, and it's got to be finished, right? It's got to sound professional, like it was professionally produced. Then I'm probably going to do most of that directly in my DAW. And, it's going to be just me sitting at the keyboard. I don't get a lot of time at the piano. I won't jump into Sibelius all that much. Occasionally I'll work out ideas in Sibelius. But when I've got more time with a score, often what I'll do is I'll brainstorm ideas at the piano. I'll come up with themes. I'll come up with just the raw material. And then I'll jump over to Sibelius and I'll really work out my ideas in Sibelius, where I can see the notation, I can see how it interacts. And I'm good enough in Sibelius, I can make things happen really quickly. And then I'll use my DAW as the place where I perform and record my music. And if you look at it like that, and when you're sitting, you're trying to improvise a line for the cello, it's going to be completely different than if you sit and you write a line for cello at the piano or, in Sibelius, and then you perform that line into your DAW. It's going to just feel like a completely different style of writing. And that's just stuff that you got to keep in mind. How do you like to work? What style of music are you going to do? Are you doing dance music? Because then you probably want to look at Ableton or Bitwig, right? Those are the two DAWs that are really a little more powerful. I haven't personally used Bitwig or Ableton. I don't really do that style of music very often. But I've heard a lot of people really love Ableton, and Bitwig looks really good as well. So, and Reaper. Obviously, Reaper is a good choice because it's cheap. So, okay, let me jump back. Let's see. I've got Gustav's piece here. So let me go ahead and throw this into Sibelius. And we'll take a listen. Okay. Here we go. Okay, well, that was really, really good. I liked it. I would say once again, you're in sketch mode here. So you've got a lot of good ideas, some really interesting progressions, melodically pretty cool. Harmonically, obviously, I really liked it. Formally, though, I feel like we're kind of wandering. And this is a perfect example of, I would say, sit down, pick up a Chopin piece, right, like a waltz or a mazurka or something like that, and look at how did Chopin do it, or how did Mahler write some of his songs. Mahler, in particular, gets real interesting on form for me, so I always like to look at how did he do it. But whoever it is, pick your favorite composer. To me, is very Chopin-esque, kind of waltzy sounding. So now, obviously, there's some issues notation-wise here. I feel like this was an upbeat. You may not feel like that, though, but it feels like an upbeat, so I would probably start the bar, right after these two 8th notes, two 16th notes. So, yeah, and other than that, I think we're here. Well, yeah, I would say that's probably where you need to start is looking formally at another piece that feels similar and saying, how can I develop this? One of the things I notice is that this initial theme, which is great, it feels like there's more there, right? That feels like a basic idea, right? You've got a 2-measure basic idea, and you've got a 2-measure repetition of that basic idea, which, if you have studied any classical form, that's the beginning of a sentence, right? So where would we go with that? We would want to have some continuation, right? Right, something like that, where it feels like you finish out that initial idea. Now, maybe that's what you were going for. Maybe you were going for the kind of shock of, I'm taking you down a rabbit hole here, and what felt like was going to be the initial theme is actually not. However, I would say probably that wasn't your goal, and hopefully what you're trying to do is, write something that feels a little bit more standard. So I would say, yeah, look at what you've got. You've got some really great material here, and you just need to sit back and say, what's missing out of this piece? But you've got a lot of really good stuff to work from, and you can go a million different directions with it. Same with the ending. It just kind of abruptly ends, and you could really continue that on much further. But I would say the best way to do that, once again, looking at a piece that you really like and kind of mapping out the form and saying, how does this composer that I like do it, and I'm going to do it in a very similar way. So let's see. Okay, let me jump into a couple more questions, and then we're coming up to an hour here, so I'm going to probably call it in a minute. Before I jump on that, be sure to, if you want to learn to compose, check out my courses, Music Composition 101 and Music Composition 201. They're both over at artofcomposing.com, and they are very thorough. What I really like to teach is strong foundational skills. So I like to make sure that you understand, how does basic form work? How does harmony work? How does melody work? How do they all work together? How does accompaniment work? How does accompaniment relate to orchestration? Because I think that's a good way to get your head wrapped around it. And then in the 201 course, we pull apart Beethoven Piano Sonata number 1, movement number 1, and we go measure by measure through each harmony, through each note in the melody, and we learn how to do that ourselves. And I think for me, even creating the course was a journey, and I feel like I learned a lot just doing that. And I know you can learn a lot too, so check it out, artofcomposing.com. Check out the courses. Okay, let's check out a few more questions here. Thank you for the Symposium. I want to modulate to other keys, but can't make it sound soft like Mozart. What progressions basically does he use? Okay, well, modulation, I know it can be a little bit tricky to get your head wrapped around it, but effectively what you're trying to do when you modulate from one key to another, and we'll just stick right now with closely related keys. There's obviously different kinds of modulations. There's, right, you could be doing, right? So now we're in C, and then you hear this kind of stuff in pop all the time, right? Just a big direct modulation, or maybe the right, you'll get the big direct modulation on a 5 chord or some kind of suspended 5 chord or whatever. Easy one to do, right? You also have common tone modulation, or modulating using chromatic medians, right? Where all you got to do is have at least one common tone. If you have 2 common tones, usually even sounds smoother. But moving around chromatically, right? You're keeping that. I kept that E in the bass there. Now, the other kind of main type of modulation that I'll be using is common tone modulation. So, or sorry, not common tone, pivot chord modulation, right? Where the one key and the other key will share some kind of chord. What I did there, and I know that was a really simple one, but I went from here, from C to A minor, which is also going to act as my pivot chord. And then because I've already pivoted now, or I could do it something like that, where I went to a 2 chord in C major, but it's also the minor 4 chord, right? So do it like that, and then a 5 chord in the new key, A minor, to A minor. And what I did there is, you know what? Let me pull up the harmony chart again, because it'll kind of help a little bit. So on the chart, if you look at, you've got, right, I started at 1, where it's C major here, in 1. And then I went to 6. Now 6 in C major is A minor, right? But in the new key of A minor, it's the 1 chord. So that acts as, it's like a neighbor, right? They're like close friends, so you can kind of skip from one to the other. And then once you do that, then you can change the chart, what the root of the chart is. And I know this is the major chart. The minor chart is basically, it's the same, but the tonality of the chords can change. But if we imagine now that we're on a new 1 chord, I can go to the 4 chord, right? Or we'll do it like this. This is now D minor, which is 4 in A minor, and then to a 5 chord, which is E7, right? And then to A minor. And now what we've done is we've effectively modulated. I've got a complete cadence there. So, and that's what confirms the key. That's what makes it sound like we officially have done that. And that's effectively what Mozart and Haydn and Bach are doing most of the time. They're doing pivot chord modulations, right? Or common chord modulations. It goes by a couple different names. So I would say look at doing that. Pick 2 closely related keys, and the way you know a key is closely related is that it's only one accidental difference from the other key, right? So if we're in C major, then you've got obviously A minor, which has no accidentals, C major to E minor, which is 1 sharp, C major to G major, which is also 1 sharp, or C major to F, or C major to D minor, right? Those are the closely related keys. And if you line up the chords in the 2, you're going to see that, oh, there is a lot of shared chords here. A minor, you got, or sorry, C major, you got C, D minor, E minor, F major, G, A, B diminished, and C. And then if you go to A minor, right? A minor, which is in both, B diminished, C major in both. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of shared chords here because there's no accidentals. D minor, which is the 4 in A minor and 2 in C major. Now, this is not a shared chord. E major and E minor, right? And then you've got 6 is F major, and then you got G sharp diminished there. So So yeah, that's effectively that's modulation in a nutshell, and that'll get you there. Once again, and I can't probably say this enough, really ever, is that you should get into the music. If there's some specific sound that you feel that Mozart did, and you really liked it, you really like the way he modulated from this key to that key, sit down and figure out how he did it. What are the chords? Now, it could be a little bit complicated. It could be written as counterpoint, right? And you may not get a very clear kind of, but a lot of times you do, and it is very clear. And if you're having trouble figuring out, look at the strong beat. So look at beat 1 or beat 3, and see what notes are on that beat. Right? If it's F and D, then chances are that that's a 2/6 chord in C major, right? That kind of stuff. Okay. Well, let me just try to hit up some last couple questions here. Do you recommend any books for composing? Yes, if you go over to artofcomposing.com, I've got under one of the menu items up there. Let me see which one it is. I think it's under resources. No, it's under... Yeah, it's under the blog one. It's a drop down. But I've got a reading list, and I'll go ahead and post this. I probably need to make that a little bit clearer in the menu. But I've got a little reading list here. I've got a couple books that I really like. Classical Form by William Kaplan, Voice Leading by David Huron, Fundamentals of Musical Composition by Arnold Schoenberg. I talked about Modal Counterpoint by Peter Schubert, 20th Century Harmony by Vincent Persichetti. I think it's a really great book. A Geometry of Music, I think really clears up a lot of ideas about how harmony works. George Frederick Mackay, Creative Orchestration, one of the best books on orchestration I've seen. Henry Brandt, Textures and Timbres. Behind Bars by Elaine Gould. If you're writing notation, you should really have a good reference, so that's a great book. And then Sammy Adler's book, Study of Orchestration, I think is also a really good reference. I recommend reading it through at least once, but it's not just like a page turner kind of thing. So let's see. I think that's most of the questions here. I apologize for if I didn't get to your piece tonight. Next week I'll be doing this next week again, and yeah, I hope you had a good time in the symposium. I enjoy doing these, and it always gets me thinking. So until next time, go have some fun, write a lot of music, and I'll definitely be writing a lot of music. I'll probably have more to say about scoring the soap opera and ideas that I have as we move into it. And hopefully soon I'll be able to share some of the music. I don't want to put anything out there yet because obviously it's still all being made. So I don't want to do that until everything's released. But yeah, have a good week, and I'll see everybody next week. Talk to you later.